Hello, I'm Katy and I'm going to show you some of my favourite arts commissions that I've worked on with Sustrans over the years. Currently we're working with United Visual Artists on a fantastic site, Combe Down Tunnel, over a mile long over in Bath, and they've presented a work called The Passage, lighting up 20 of the 60 or 70 recesses in the tunnel, and they've commissioned Mirror Calix, a sound artist, to make a soundscape that accompanies the lights that kind of pulsate, and they are triggered by your own movement as you come close to the recesses. They then have a sort of colour and sound piece that accompanies you while you walk or cycle past each particular recess. My next choice is the portrait bench, which is part of the Connect 2 scheme. 84 different portrait benches across the UK. Each one, local people chose 3 characters that kind of represented themselves, and they were designed to kind of reduce the detail of the figure to the bare minimum, so the figure was still recognisable. They're life-size figures that stand beside a railway seat, railway sleeper bench, so they can sit amongst their local heroes and rest and see the scheme that has been created. Of course, working with artists, Sustrans has been doing this over many, many years. And in fact, one of the very early works back in the late 80s was with Andy Goldsworthy. And he produced 2 earthworks, one Lambton Worm, the other Jolly Drover's Maze up in Consett in Sunderland. And here, enormous earthworks were created in sections of old railway sidings. They created the Lambton Worm was about 1/4 of a mile long, a ridge which is now grassed over and locates that particular point along the route. You never forget visiting that place. You can cycle along the top of the ridge or keep to the cycle path on one side. And Jolly Drover's Maze is like an enormous giant thumbprint as it comes up through the earth, and it also acts to slow people down as they approach a very busy junction and roundabout. And these works have now been in place for 20 years. You can see them on Google Earth, and they're very impressive, very dramatic, and work that really only Sustrans has that opportunity to create such gigantic artworks on such a scale. So we've continued commissioning art and working with artists. A couple of interesting projects on back in probably 94, about then, the Phoenix Trail in Oxford, where we commissioned an artist to be the artist in residence at the local furniture making college in Thame, Rycote College. And Angus Ross then oversaw students presenting work of their own using locally sourced oak from the Chiltern Hills. Each of the students presented ideas which were then selected. We worked with Earthworks furniture makers who were at the end of the route, which is at Princess Risborough. So Angus Ross made 3 railway sleeper seats where when you put the seat down, a signal at the top of the seat came down to show it was engaged. When you got off, the seat went up and the signal went up so you could go on. So you could see in advance if someone was already sitting at the seat. He also made a winged seat that reflected the kites that were very traditionally in the area, that are still fly frequently around Thame. We then had 6 or 8 of the students produce different work, reflective space, which was like a picture frame, and you went up, stepped into it and looked out across the landscape, and behind you could see the Chiltern Hills. So it was simply a very large oak frame with a seat integral into that. We also worked with Lucy Casson, who made marker points, 3 figures on poles, which she did working with local schools, because in all the projects we aim to involve local people, residents in some way or other, either working directly with the artist or helping to make certain parts of the work, or simply to understand how the artistic process happens and how their own environment and their own area can be improved and upgraded by working with artists and with good designers. Another work that I'm particularly fond of, it's something that I worked on myself, was the Genome Stripes. And this was in Cambridge, working with Sir John Sulston, who'd been very instrumental in decoding the human gene. And of course, what a huge effect that's had on the whole progress, you know, what we know now, and the whole health implications that that has had. We worked near Great Sheldon, which is near the Sanger Institute, with the Wellcome Trust, and John Sulston recommended BRCA2, which is the breast cancer gene, which is 10,253 components, which is the code for that particular gene. And that's one gene of about 20,000 genes in each cell of the human body. So what we wanted to do was lay out BRCA2 on about a mile length of path. So it would be the biggest expression, the biggest demonstration of this particular gene. So each of the 4 components of the gene was laid out in a different color. So it would be, for example, you know, green, red, red, blue, blue, yellow, green, 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 red, blue, red. Whatever that code was, we did it completely accurately, so that anyone who wanted to see what the code looked like, it was there on the path. And this actually is having very current implications, because in America, human genes have been patented. And John Sulston is at the forefront of the fight to sort of take away that patent in America, because actually one's own gene code is part of one's own human heritage and shouldn't be patented. But the fight goes on with that. So as you travel this mile-long route, so you travel over part of your own gene code. Another work that also takes the full length of the path to experience is the linear orchard down on Collier's Way in Somerset. And the Collier's Way, this is really from Bath down to Frome, on an old railway line, on little bits of off-road section, and then some on-road section. And we looked at old apple tree varieties. And of course, Somerset orchards are under great threat. Many, many orchards now dug up, put to development, and so those amazing species and varieties of apple are simply no longer available. And if you go to a local supermarket, you can probably only get 5 types of apples. Whereas, let me just read out some of the apple varieties that are down on Collier's Way. It reads almost like poetry. James Grieve, Devonshire Quandram, Merton Chardon, Ellis Orange, King of the Pippins, Egremont Russet, Baker Delicious, Darcy Spice, Laxton Epicure, Autumn Pearmain, Melrose, Lord Lambert, and so on. There are probably 40 different varieties on the path, and so as you travel down in the right time of year, and we've tried to go from very early fruiting varieties to very late fruiting varieties, so possibly for as much as 5 or 6 months of the year you would be able to go and pick some of these most delicious and quite unusual varieties of apple. And I think that was inspired because there were some apple trees on the route when we went down to look, and we think that people used to throw apple cores out of the train window, and some of those took root and have grown. So that was a kind of inspiration behind that, because all the work we do is very much related to the area in which the work is sited. We don't come in with an idea and plonk it in. We do a lot of research into the area. We do a lot of community involvement, community engagement. What do people want? How might it be? What are the local stories, the local concerns? And so the artwork is developed in that way. So on that particular route, Somerset, very famed for its orchards, for its cider, and there are now really a lot of different varieties which have been named with small enamel plaques set into boulders beside each of the trees. Right. My final choice, and really there are a lot more commissions, a lot more artists that I could talk to. There's so many great projects we've done, but this one is particularly interesting, and it's called Hive Use, between Lincoln and Boston. We worked with a very creative architect, Paul Robrecht from Robrecht and Dam, who came over and did a kind of mini architectural design for platforms that raise you up above the very flat Lincolnshire landscape, and the idea that you would then see the landscape from a different perspective. And there are 2 viewing platforms, one at either end of a path that's probably about 25 miles long. The one at Lincoln reflects the Boston stump, and is called the Lincoln Stump. And the one in Boston reflects the fantastic cathedral, and the spire of Lincoln Cathedral can be seen for miles and miles. And there, ancient medieval stone cathedral has very quirky vaults, and they're called the pendulum vaults, which has a kind of spiral effect. And so the Boston Hive View was called the Boston Pendulum. So they both reflect either end where you're going. They're steel structures clad in timber, and the colours of the timber reflect the colours of the birds population in that particular area. And you can't pass them without stopping, climbing up to the top of the tower and just seeing the landscape from a different perspective. And it's a very inspiring work. So that's my choice. And as I say, visit the website and see hundreds of other commissions we've made, which are very exciting, peppered across the UK and really worth a visit.